Hello, I want to welcome you to the Mind Over Mental Block module on increasing trust. So this is Mandy Patterson, your mental performance coach and owner of Mandy Patterson Coaching. In this module, we're going to talk about increasing trust. The main thing I want you to walk away with today are to understand really what trust is and to identify some common trust breakdowns that happen. Lastly, I want to make sure that you know how to enhance your trusting skills so that you can overcome those breakdowns and really just thrive in getting your skills, overcoming those mental blocks, and really just owning your competition and being so successful in every area of your sport. So before we jump into the content today, I want to ask, as always, that you take a minute just to get rid of all distractions. Put your phone away, turn off the TV, make sure you're sitting in a quiet place where you are going to be fully engaged, fully present for our time together. The next thing I'm going to ask is that you have your action guide handy. Again, if you're filling it out on a computer or on a device, make sure that your fill-ins are saving before you close it out. Otherwise, just print it out, write in your answers, and that's going to be perfectly fine as well. Okay, so let's talk about the ways that you can really be successful in your sport. So the first thing you need to do is work hard at practice, okay? So this is self-explanatory, right? Obviously, you go to practice, you want to work hard. We know hard work is what it takes to be successful, but that's one area where it's essential. And number two, to be successful, is you've got to be able to trust in competition. So the first one, again, is really pretty common. Most people understand, okay, if I want to be really good at my sport, I've got to put in the work at practice. But the second one is really where people lose a lot of their momentum because they don't understand that there is a completely different component to their game or their sport for competition. It looks completely different than it does at practice. And so that's really what we're going to talk about today. Our objective is really to understand how to balance the two mindsets. So practice and working hard to improve your skills in your routines, but then also being able to let go and trust what you've practiced when you compete. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about trust because that's our main topic for today, right? Trust. So what does it mean to trust? How am I going to define trust? So trust is really defined as letting go of your conscious controlling tendencies and allowing your skills to run off of motor memory, okay, or what you've practiced. So again, letting go of your conscious controlling tendencies and allowing your skills to be run off of motor memory or what you learned from practice, okay? So relying on that muscle memory, that's a term you hear very commonly when you talk about this area, but relying on muscle memory instead of all the cues, all the thinking, all the thought, all the stuff that comes into your mind, right? So that's what trust is. Being able to let go of all of the controlling, all of the directing, all of those really detailed thoughts, and being able just to show up and have fun, okay? Relying on what you practiced. So what does trust feel like? When you play with trust, when you perform with trust, what's the difference? Okay, some very common feedback that I get when I ask this question. I felt like I was on autopilot. Things just happened. Things were moving. It felt real. It felt right. I was in the moment, okay? So focused, so present. I was just letting it happen. Things just happened. I didn't feel like I had to work really hard, right? Things were just lining up the way they were supposed to, right? I was in the zone. You hear that a lot when it comes to baseball and like more of the contact sports, but this is absolutely possible in cheerleading and gymnastics too. I was in the zone. So being in the zone really means you were so immersed in the moment and what you were doing that you lost all sense of time and space. Nothing else mattered. It's like when you're involved in a task and you look up, it's like, oh my, I've been sitting here for 3 hours and it felt like 10 minutes. Okay. So that's the zone. That's that mentality, that fully immersed, fully present, fully focused. My performance felt effortless. It felt easy, right? There was no hesitation. I felt relaxed. So these are the comments, these are the thoughts that you will hear when you talk about someone performing with trust. And this is what we want, okay? We want to work really hard at practice. We want to really, really develop our skills. And then when it goes to when we come to a competition or a performance or a meet, we want to step into trust. So I think it's important here to define or differentiate between confidence and trust, because they get mixed up a lot, okay? So confidence does help you have greater trust in your skills. So as you do the skills, as you're learning and developing, and you get better at your skills, your confidence goes up, and then you're able to trust more. You don't feel like you have to be so controlled, like you have to be so on with every single step of what you're trying to do. Things just happen, okay? So confidence and trust are related, but they're very different, okay? So confidence is really that belief in your ability to execute your skills well. We talked a lot about this before. So that idea of, I believe that I can do my full, right, and land it successfully. I believe that I'm capable of doing a back handspring by myself, okay? So that's confident. Trust is in your skills is your ability to just rely on what you've already learned in practice, okay? And you just allow your skills to just happen naturally in competitions and in meets. So that's deciding, I'm going to trust that if I practice really well, I'm going to perform well. So again, the idea is for confidence is I believe I can do this. With trust, it's I will trust. You decide to step into that mindset. Okay, so before we jump into the two mindsets that we need to be able to successfully practice and perform really, really well, I want to talk about some stages of learning, because this is really important to understand in order to see how trust is related to mental blocks. So the first stage of learning is being a beginner, right? So the first thing that you need to do is you need to learn all the steps required for your skill. So these are like the fundamentals or the technique portion, okay? How do you do the skill? What do you do? Okay, if you're learning about handspring, what are the steps? So in this stage, you're consciously focusing on every single step, every body part, and your mind is super active, okay? So after you practice for a while, you become more familiar with the steps. So really you only need to focus on small adjustments instead of every single step, right? You don't have to think about what your legs are going to do, what your arms are going to do, what your head's going to do, every single part of it, okay? You just focus on certain areas that might need improvement, right? Okay, my legs aren't together. Let me think about squeezing those, right? My arms aren't being strong, right? I'm buckling, okay? So you make adjustments as needed. So this is where you really move into the intermediate stage. This is where you're developing what a correct skill is. So how does it look and feel when you do it correctly? So with enough practice and instruction, eventually you're going to be able to make your way to the expert or advanced stages. Okay, this is really where muscle memory comes in. After practicing the skill for a certain amount of time, you get to the point where you can execute the skill without thinking about every single step, right? So your mind is just focusing on the goal, the main objective, and your body just does what it's supposed to do. It performs automatically, okay? So when you put in the practice with the right type of instruction, you really develop these memory programs, and what that does is it allows your mind to remain free and relaxed so that your body can perform what it knows how to do. One of the things that a lot of athletes miss is that at practice, not only are you learning how to do skills correctly, but you're learning to be athletic. You're learning athleticism. So what that means is you can make adjustments during a competition when something is different than it normally is without having to completely redo everything, right? You learn what it's supposed to feel like inside, right? So you just learn on a different level what it takes to be successful in the skill without thinking about every single step. So that's what the expert looks like. So as you're learning, so as you're going from a beginner to an expert, you're developing confidence, right? And we already talked about a minute ago, confidence builds trust or leads to greater trust, okay? What also happens as you progress up the stair steps from beginner to expert is the conscious direction that you give goes down. You don't have to think as hard. You don't have to be as detailed, okay? You're still focused as an expert. Experts, so Olympians are still focused on certain things that they need to do to be successful, okay? But it's very specific. It's not every single step, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about. So it's really important to understand trust and the practice and performance mindsets so that you can accept where you are in the process and what it takes to be successful. Okay. So when you're at a place where your skills are well learned and you've reached that point where you don't have to over control, right? You don't have to think about every step, but something happens and you start to think about every step. So when you're in that expert category, you've got your full down pat. You don't have to think about it anymore. And then something happens where maybe a teammate falls. Maybe you fall all of a sudden because something funny happened, right? And then all of a sudden you start overthinking, you start over controlling, you start diverting back to thinking about every single step very consciously. Your mind is so active with all of the steps. That's really when that fear comes in. Okay. So what I call that is a breakdown in trust. Okay. You start to let the overthinking, you start to go back down the stair steps, right? So you start that conscious direction, you start thinking about too many things. And this is what leads to mental blocks. Okay. When you're in the expert stages and then you start to over control, overthink, that's when all the fear and the perfectionism and all of that kicks in, and you start to, and that's where really mental blocks can come into play. So often athletes will develop blocks in the expert stages because they don't know how to fully transition from their practice mindset into the trust mindset. They're over controlling, they over analyze to the point where their body feels so much tension. Maybe an injury occurred, which is often the case, but even if it doesn't, your brain is on overdrive. So you're fighting your memory programs, right? Your body already knows what it's supposed to do, but you start trying to tell it what to do. And it gets confused. There's tension there. It creates this fear and this idea that you're not safe anymore. And it really causes your confidence to tank, right? We talked about before what mental blocks are and how they occur. And it's all related to that fear response kicking in, okay? So it's really important to understand which stage of training you're in and to accept it, okay? Along the way, you're going to develop trust in your own abilities, which will, again, build confidence. But eventually, you're going to get to a place where you're fully ready to trust. Your body's going to be free to perform the skill, and you'll have the mental strength to allow it, okay? So this is the key to overcoming your block. All right. So now that we've really talked about the 3 stages of learning, I want to go ahead and jump into the 2 mindsets that you need to really thrive in your sport, okay? And really to tackle those blocks, to really master competition and practice and be able to step from performance mindset into your practice mindset and back and forth successfully. So now that you understand what the stages of learning are, you have an idea where you're at in the process. And you also have an idea of why mental blocks occur as it relates to the stages of the process, right? So we know how a lack of trust contributes to mental blocks. So now what I want to do is I want to take a look at those 2 mindsets that are key for every athlete to be successful. That's your practice and your performance mindset. Okay, another way to say that is your training mindset, which is your practice mindset, and your trusting mindset, which is your performance mindset. So let's talk about the practice mindset. It is the ability to analyze execution and uncover mistakes so that you can learn to correct those mistakes, right? It's also the ability to train in order to get better for competition. So the training or the practice mindset looks like this. So you'll see, practice makes perfect. I don't like thinking about being perfect, even at practice, because again, perfection doesn't exist. But the idea is that you're trying to become as perfect as possible in that you want to make the least amount of mistakes. You want to find mistakes and fix them during practice. Okay? Again, 2 + 2 = 5. That is not correct. So you're looking for mistakes. You're looking for things that you can improve in. Okay? You see this thinking cap illustration. So your brain is so active. Your brain is on. You're focused on a lot of steps, right? You're really, really thinking about every single step of what you're trying to do. Okay, again, you're learning, you're improving, you're practicing, you're developing. That's part of the practice mindset. So something happens, you make a mistake, and you try to figure out how to fix it. A stunt falls, and you brainstorm with your team, okay, what are some options we have to be more successful? Okay, and again, practice, 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 practice. You're developing endurance, you're putting in a lot of energy, a lot of work, and you're really on overdrive with your thinking. So that's the practice mindset. That's the training mindset. And it's so important to be able to fully invest in that mindset when you're at practice. But again, the challenge comes when people struggle to let go of the practice mindset and step fully into that trust mindset. So let's talk about the trust mindset or the performance mindset. The trusting mind is letting go of your controlling tendencies and being able to trust the practice that you've put in. So high confidence is going to be one of the huge keys to really being able to trust. So just remember that. Okay, the performance mindset, you'll see this here, relax. Okay, take a deep breath, be calm. The idea of just do it. Okay, so we're not being complicated with our cues. You're not going to walk in with 5 performance cues for every skill. Okay, you're going to have 1 or 2 process goals for the day, right? You're going to know exactly what you need to do, and you're just going to show up confident and ready to do it. Okay, we're not going to make it complicated. Keep things simple. Again, calm mind. Don't think about all the things that could go wrong. Don't think about all the things that you want to happen. Okay, just think about the things that are really, really important for you really being successful. And there's no judgment. Okay, if you make a mistake during the competition, the routine, the meet, let it go. You don't need to fix it. It's over. It's done with. When you get back to practice, that's when you can work on it. Okay, don't be thinking about whatever happened in that meet in the first event when you're doing your second event. So there's no judgment with the performance mindset. So again, practice mindset, good for practice, performance, good for competition, right? In a practice mindset, you've got an active mind, you're very critical of your skills, you want to analyze mistakes, you're working on technique, you're correcting, right? And you're focusing on improving for the future. So that's all part of the practice mindset. The performance mindset is good for competition. You have a quiet mind, you're not judging what's happening, you're just going with it. Whatever happens, happens. Okay? You accept what happens and let it happen. You're going to perform aggressively. Okay? But you also want to be patient. You're not going to rush things because you're afraid something bad might happen. Okay? You get rid of all those expectations and you're just going to focus on the moment. So now let's talk about those trust breakdowns that we mentioned earlier. So often athletes who struggle to perform well, they thrive at practice, but they let their nerves get the best of them at competition. And the reason this happens is because they don't know how to let go of that practice mindset and fully step into the trusting mindset. They love to train and they really depend on good technique to give them confidence. So they can't step fully into that trusting mindset. So they want their performance to not only hit, but it needs to look good and feel good when they perform. Does that sound familiar? All right, so let's talk about the main trust breakdowns. Okay, so the first one, overthinking. So that looks like being too mechanical with your performance. You're thinking too much about the skill or the technique. Okay, over-controlling. You're over-controlling your skills. You're trying too hard to perform well. You're working harder, but you're not working smarter. Okay, the next one is over-analyzing. Okay, you overanalyze mistakes. You're trying to understand why you made a mistake and trying to fix it during the competition. Perfectionism. You're trying too hard to be perfect with your performance. You try to avoid mistakes. Okay. The next one is fear of failure. So this could be fear of failure. Maybe you're afraid of tension or you just have some general anxiety, right? But it's when you're afraid of performing poorly or making others disappointed. Okay. You don't want to disappoint your coach. You're starting thinking about letting your teammates down if you don't land a certain pass. Okay. Indecision. You're not sure about a skill. You hesitate. And the last one is doubt, lack of confidence. It's when you doubt your own ability to perform well. I don't know if I can land it. I'm not sure I can hit it. Okay. So be on the lookout for these things as they're happening when you're competing. Okay. Do you have a tendency to overthink things? Are you looking for mistakes that are made and trying to fix them while you're trying to compete? Are you focused on like you have to get first place? Are you focused on I can't make any mistakes? We can't have any deductions, right? Because once your mind goes to any of these things, these trust breakdowns, your confidence is going to go, you're going to go back to that practice mindset and you're going to struggle. So the problem is that when you're focused on being perfect and having perfect technique that feels exactly right, you're going to have trouble reacting and making changes when you need to in the performance. So let's say you're used to throwing your tumbling pass on the spring floor at your home gym, but you get to the competition and the floor has more bounce to it. So if you're in your practice mindset, you're going to be overanalyzing all the steps required for the skill, as well as how you can make changes to perform exactly the way you expect, even though the floor is different. This can cause you to adjust the power you use, so you under-rotate or over-rotate, okay? You adjust your technique too much and you end up falling off the mat. Instead, if you were in your trusting mindset or your performance mindset, you'd rely on your practice and your body awareness to adjust as you warm up your skills. And then your body will just naturally adapt to the floor and your mind would still remain clear and confident, even if the skill doesn't look and feel exactly like it normally does. Okay? So this is the power of the trusting mindset. Now what I want to talk about is how the trust breakdowns look during competitions. How do they affect you? So what happens as a situation occurs? Okay? So from the above example that I gave, so a teammate over-rotates right before your tumbling pass. Okay? So the situation occurs, and then you start to doubt your trust. The breakdown happens. Okay? So what happens? You're going to try to over-control your movements because you don't want to over-rotate, right? You're assuming if it happened to them, it can happen to you. Okay? So you're not trusting your skills, trusting your practice. You're trying to protect yourself from a fall. Okay? So then what happens? Your performance changes. You're going to tumble slower. You're going to over control, and then you end up under rotating, or maybe your tumbling falls short and you get in someone else's way, right? So this is kind of the process. This is why the trust breakdowns are really important to understand. Okay? So you got to identify when during the competition does your trust start to break down? What is the actual breakdown that you experience? Are you trying to be too perfect, right? Are you trying to avoid mistakes? Are you trying to avoid disappointing others? What is it? What are you trying to do? And then understand, how do you change your performance based on that trust breakdown? So now what we want to talk about is, how do you actually build trust? Now that we know what trust is, we know what the breakdowns are, how do you build trust? So the first thing you can do, have a plan and commit fully to each skill in your routine. So this is process goals, right? So stick to what works in practice. Do not make any changes, okay? So again, this could be, let's say, for example, your teammate is watching other teams perform, and then they're trying to give you hints about what to do. So they come and tell you, hey, make sure you don't punch too hard in your tumbling, because I saw this other team and they fell off the floor, right? So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about here. Just have a plan before you show up that day and commit fully to it for every single skill that you're going to do that day in your routine or your meet. The second way to build trust, be confident. So have your confidence resume, review it before you go on the floor, and after the competition, analyze your performance and write down what are some things that you should be confident about with that day. Were you able to fully trust? Okay? So be confident. Proactive confidence fuels trust. Remember that. The third way to build trust, think simple. Okay? So we're not going to show up and say, oh my gosh, we're next. I hope we hit. I hope we don't fall. Okay, stick this, chest up here. Okay, watch out for this girl. Stay on the mat. Is my dad here yet? Right? Because that's sometimes what our brain feels like when we're getting ready to compete. So instead of all of that, what we're going to say is, I can do this. I'm going to breathe. Be relaxed. Focus. Let's go. Right? That's the kind of thing. That's the way you're going to talk to yourself. That's the way you're going to encourage yourself to keep trust high. And the fourth way is to practice for trust. Okay? So when you're actually at practice, what I want you to do is I want you to try to turn up the pressure. I want you to create situations during practice where you can practice or prepare to step into your trust mindset for an upcoming competition. So what that looks like is, maybe you ask a teammate or a coach to watch you do a certain skill. And that puts pressure on you so that you can practice, okay, I'm going to think simple. Okay, I'm going to rely on my training and I'm just going to do the skill. I'm not going to think too much about it. Or maybe you give yourself a challenge. Okay, today I'm going to hit 5 out of 5. Okay, I'm going to hit 5 out of 7, whatever it looks like. Just so, again, you put on the pressure and you can practice relying on your training. And you're not going to over control and overthink, okay? So the next thing I want to talk to you about is, how do you actually practice for trust? So this, again, is one of the 4 ways to help build trust, is practice for trust. So how do you actually practice for trust? The key is to practice for trust during training so you can transfer that feeling to competition. So when competition season is getting close, what I want you to do is I want you to try to spend about 50% of your practice in the trust mode. So this really means that certain times during your practice, maybe it's the last, 30 minutes of your practice, maybe it's the last hour, maybe it's the 2 days of practice before your competition. But I want you to show up that day as if it's a competition. Okay? So that means that your mind is prepared to be simple. You're prepared to not overcomplicate things. You're prepared to just rely on what you've practiced, right? You're going to pep yourself up for, I'm ready. I have everything that I need. My training is complete and I'm ready to perform. Okay. So that's really what you're trying to do here. So your goal is to practice like you compete. Okay. We're not trying to just focus on perfect technique. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is using your full pre-performance routine. Okay. So don't just wait to do the skill or the routine full out until the competition to get in your practice, into your performance mindset. Go ahead and pretend like you've got competition that day. Okay. And you're just going to go in and you're going to trust and you're going to believe you can do it. So the idea is early in the season, you want to train technique, right? Or early in the week, maybe you're training technique, and then you're going to taper off the training mindset as you get closer to competition. Okay. So remember, a calm mind performs freer than an overactive mind. So the goal here with everything we've talked about today, again, is with the two mindsets, the practice and the performance mindset, our goal is we want to strive for perfection in practice. We want to strive to correct mistakes. We want to make the most of our practice, but we're going to accept the fact that humans cannot be perfect in competition and that we're there just to show up, to do what we know how to do and to have fun. And that is key to performing well. So again, what you'll see here is all of my practice is complete. I am prepared to perform with complete trust. This is a great mantra for you to adapt, just to know, okay, I am fully accepting, I am stepping into that trust mindset today. And I'm showing up at this competition, this meet, ready to have fun. Okay, so that wraps up all the content for today. So the next steps, you're going to reflect. So there are 2 questions you'll see on your action guide. What trust breakdowns did you identify during this training that commonly come up for you? So again, just think about when you're at competition, when you're at meets, when you're at when you're in performance situations, when do you feel like you start to doubt yourself? When do you feel like you're trying to overcorrect, overperform? Okay, when does that fear set in? The next question you're going to consider is, as a result of this training, what changes are you going to make? So how are you going to apply this material? So again, take a few minutes there and write down what you felt like was really important with this training and how you're going to use it to really, really step into that trusting mindset, that performance mindset during your next competition. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to go complete your improving trust worksheet. So again, complete the worksheet, print it out and fill it out, or download it to your device, fill it out, and make sure the responses are saving before you close the document. But you're actually going to send this to me via email or screenshot and text it to me. And the last thing you're going to do is you're going to share your takeaways. So the ways to do that are on your action guide there. There are 4 different ways to do that, but I want to hear from you. I want to know what was really, really important to you, what stood out in this training as super important. And just that's going to make the biggest difference for you in overcoming this mental block and really thriving in your sport, in practice, and in competition. Okay, so that wraps up the content for this module on increasing trust. I'll see you in the next one.